Hello, welcome to Exotic Gardening Live, and I'm outside for the first time filming this live, and you might hear all sorts of things as we're live outside. So you might hear a bit of music, you might hear people playing out, you might hear the birds, and you might hear a lawnmower as well, just as we start the video. So, filming this, like I said, outside in the garden because it is light. We're into May now, so it's nice and light on an evening, and we'll probably carry on this video for quite a while. We might get to sunset as well. As we go through the summer, it'll be lighter and lighter, and we'll be able to do these videos fully in the light for the full video. So, a big shout out to people who have already said hi this evening. So hi to Harold Betterson, hi to Matthew Farrow, hi to Volvo Safe, and hi to Matt AC Davison. Good evening to everybody watching, or good day, good morning, wherever you're watching around the world. Just thought I'd do a check-in video today. Basically, not done a live video for a couple of weeks. In that time, we've gone through and we've got 10,000 subscribers to the channel, so thank you to everybody that subscribes to the channel. Been doing this for over 10 years now, and over the last sort of 2 or 3 years I've been doing it on a weekly basis. So basically since the pandemic started, I started doing a video every week on a Sunday. So thanks to everybody who's subscribed. If you've not yet subscribed and you enjoy exotic gardening and my channel, then please subscribe. It really helps if you do so, and like the video if you like the video, obviously. So tonight we're going to talk about spring, we're going to talk about the weather, we're going to talk about some of the plants I've got to plant out in the garden, and I'll answer any questions as we go along. So it's been rather nice, hasn't it, the weather recently, and looking at the forecast for the next few weeks, it looks pretty good. We've got mild days and we've got some warm days coming up, so we've got temperatures up to about 22 degrees coming up next week in my area. So I'm probably not looked at the rest of the country, but I'm sure there'll be higher temperatures to be found as well down south and by the coast and things like that. And the nighttime temperatures are really good as well, so we've got up to about 10 got to about 10 degrees at night time, and nice and mild all the time as well. So if you've gambled early and got your plants to plant out in the garden, or you've planted out your tender plants, probably going to get away with it, because I can't see any frost on the cards at all. As we go further and further through May into June, then frost will be a thing of the past, fingers crossed. So if you planted out early in April, then you've had a really long season and you'll get great benefit from that, because you'll be able to get plants established quicker, bigger and happier as we go through the early summer and then into the full swing of summer. If you've been cautious and sensible, like I have, then you probably haven't planted out most of your tender plants yet, but you've probably started the hardening off process. And that's the process of bringing the plants out, putting them in the shade for a week or so before putting them into the sun and planting them out, just so you're ready to bring them in if it was frosty, and you don't put them into full sun so they don't get sunburn. So I've got loads of things around me here that I will be planting out over the next week or two that have been hardening off. We've got my onset bananas, I've got plenty of those in pots. We've got my cannas that I divided a few weeks ago, and I've got all sorts of other plants ready to go. Some might plant out this week, but a few I'll leave it a little bit later, because although we're not going to see frost, sort of the houseplant style plants, really tender plants, they want warm days as well. So we're getting there. You know, like I said, we're going to get 20-22 degrees next week, and it's moving in the right direction. So fingers crossed it stays like this, and we can have a really long, great season. The other thing we need, though, for plants to grow well, obviously we need light, we need warmth, and we need water, and we need rain. So we had a bit of rain the other night, but overall it's been extremely dry. April was like a third of the average rainfall here, and we need loads more rain to get soaked into the ground for all the hardy backbone plants to get a good drench, but then for the ground to be nice and moist for planting out your tender plants as well. Otherwise we'll be watering constantly. So we need some rain as well as the warmth, but we can't have everything all the time. So let's answer a couple of questions, and then we'll do a little bit of gardening as well. So let's just check if we've got any questions. Yeah, it's been a great sunny evening, Matt, hasn't it? Been for a walk recently. I've just put my jacket on now because it will be cooling off in the next half an hour as I film this. There's the sun, you can see it just over the top of the bamboos over there. It will be setting down over the horizon in my garden soon, and then I think it's about 8:50 when it's officially sunset, but we should still have enough light to carry on going if we're still talking at that time. So let's see, question from Matthew Farrow, and this is about Gunner Manicarta. So first year it was very slow and small growth, so overwintered indoors, planted out 3 weeks ago and no growth. Will it come back? Now that's unusual that it's not growing yet. If it should be growing, if it's alive, it should be growing now, because it's been warm enough for a few weeks, you know, since sort of mid-April to get growth going. So I'd be concerned that yours is dried out over winter, and maybe it dried out too much, because you don't generally need to bring them indoors. They are hardy enough for most of the UK and most of sort of Europe as well, as long as you don't go below -15. Which most of the UK doesn't get, and it probably can take lower temperatures for short times as well. But if you brought it indoors, like I said, it's not a step I would have done. I would have kept it outdoors. So chances are it's probably dried out. If it's not dried out and you kept it watered, it should be growing by now. So that's not looking great. So will it come back? Well, I would hope to see some growth. Maybe I guess you've got it in a pot, so check the roots of it, see if they're nice and fleshy and still alive. If they've all shriveled up and dried, that's not looking good. So let us know how you get on with that one, and hopefully it's still alive. But like I said, mine, I can't really show you, but it's further off down the garden, and it's growing nicely now. Giving it a good soak of water tonight because it needs it, because it's been so dry. I've had the hose pipe on it for a good 10 minutes. Do that about once a week if it's really dry in summer, and this is the first time I've done it actually this year, actually giving it a proper water. So hopefully it'll help get the leaves bigger and bigger, because they're coming out nice and big now, but I want them to get nice and big. And I will be feeding it with bloodfish and bone and loads of chicken manure as well. So let's see if we've got any other questions. So Volvo Safe asks, do outdoor ferns need fertiliser? I found they don't really need fertiliser. They get enough nutrients from their own decaying leaves basically, or decaying matter in the area, and things fall into the crowns of the ferns, and that sort of rots down and feeds them as well. But saying that, I will obviously water them really well, and I might put a bit of seaweed spray on them if I remember in the season as well. I don't generally feed any of my ground ferns, and if you think a lot of ferns, you know, we've got a lot of native ferns and you can use them in the garden as well, but then we've got the bigger things like the tree ferns as well. You can feed them a bit if you really want, but I've not seen them need much, because like I said, the crowns over winter, they'll have some decaying, dying leaves in the centre, and that will add a bit of nutrients to the surrounding soil as well as directly into the crown, and they just don't seem to need much really, as long as the soil you've planted it in is really humus rich, lots of organic matter. When you've actually planted the fern, it seems to be all it needs basically. And I've grown tree ferns for many years, and just ground ferns, if you just talk about ground ferns, they just grow away nicely. As long as they don't dry out, they seem to be nice and happy. So I don't think they're really fussy in needing too much feed, or any feed really, as long as the soil's in good condition when you plant them. Okay, before I go on to the questions, I want to talk to you about a thing I did in my video a couple of weeks ago. So I did sowing some seeds, and we had Aloe Polyfiler, and these were a bit unusual because we get the seeds and we put them in some water, and we will wait for them to germinate in the water before we then take them out of the water and pop them on. And I said it might take a month or two to germinate. Well, in fact it took less than 2 weeks. So I've got my 5 seeds I got from Chilton's, and I think 4 of them have germinated already within 7 to 10 days, which is great. So soon I will be taking them and putting them into their own individual little seed cells. But you might be thinking, what does an Aloe Polyfiler look like when it's bigger? Well, I've got a couple of specimens down here, and I want to show you them both because they look a bit different, because they're called Aloe Polyfiler, but the common name is spiral aloe. It's called a spiral aloe because the leaves come out and grow and overlap, and as they overlap they grow around in a spiral. And if you grow one, I'd be interested to know if your spiral, goes clockwise or anti-clockwise, and does it matter if you're in the northern or southern hemisphere whether it goes clockwise or anti-clockwise, or if you're facing south or north or east or west, does it make any difference? So if you've got an aloe polyfiller, please take a look at it now and let me know if it's spiraling clockwise or anti-clockwise, and then put it in the comments below, either live in the comments here or in the actual general YouTube comments in the video underneath, and we can see if most people's aloe polyfillers spiral to the left or spiral to the right, or in the case of this one here, it's not spiraling at all. So if we look at this one, I'm going to have to tip this up without it turning too much. I'll put that close to the camera. You can see that one isn't spiraling at all. The leaves are coming out pretty much regularly, sort of straight out in all directions, and it's just like a straight, you know, leaf formation rather than spiraling left or right. So this is an unspiraled spiral aloe. This is a nice healthy one in a nice big pot. Then if we look at this one, this is spiraling, so don't want everything to fall out onto my laptop, but here we go. That one there, that is a spiral aloe, and if we look in the middle, we can see how when one leaf comes out, the next leaf comes out and overlaps it, and it's spiraling round and round. And this one is spiraling, let's have a look. Yeah, that one's spiraling clockwise, so I'd be interested to know if you're spiraling clockwise or anti-clockwise. So that's two nice aloe polyfilers in pots. I'm just going to turn the sound off my phone because that pinging might be annoying some people. So yeah, if you've got an aloe polyfiler, let me know how it's doing. So, just if anybody's asking, I will be keeping these in pots for now. I've grown them in the ground before, and I've got them through about 4 winters in the ground with a rain shelter, but they don't come through every winter, so it's a real gamble if you plant them out. Definitely need a rain shelter for most of the UK, and they're sort of hardly down to about -7-ish, but they can die in a really mild winter as well, so it's just a funny one. They can be a bit temperamental, so if you really treasure it, only have one of them, I wouldn't suggest you plant it out unless you're happy to gamble it. Right, back to the questions. Let's have a look what we've got. Okay, so Jolie's asked about Tetrapanax, TRex. It's been planted out today, hit a clay pan when planting it out, so that's where you've got a sort of thick layer of hard clay in the ground. Will it be okay in clay, and does it need feeding? Thanks. Yes, they can grow really well in clay, and clay soil generally is really good for holding nutrients and then feeding the plants, which is great, better than sandy soils or chalky soils. But when you've got a clay pan, that can mean that your ground is waterlogged. So if you plant it in an area where it's going to be thoroughly waterlogged, it won't like that, especially in winter. So it's best to break through that clay pan or grow it a bit raised up or on a bit of a mound. But you might get away with it. It depends how bad the waterlogging is. If it drains away, then it'll be totally fine. I've grown it in my raised bed areas, and I've grown it generally in the ground where it's slightly on a slight hill, bit of a, you know, not straight level, and it's been totally fine. Now I'm on heavy clay soil, but like I said, I've improved the soil and raised it up a little bit. Regarding feeding, you don't need to feed them too much. You may notice later on in the season the leaves have sort of mottley yellow colour, and that can be deficiency of like magnesium especially, so you might want to top it up with some feed later on in the season. But if you want the biggest leaves, it's like with a lot of these plants, if you want really big leaves, then you do need to feed them. So bloodfish and bone is my go-to for early spring sort of feed for most plants that are in the ground, and then for the ones that want high nitrogen, chicken fertilizer is great. Grass feed some people use, not the one with the weed killer in or moss killer, but just general grass feed as well. Or you can go down the chemical route and go for something like Miracle Grow as well, which works really well, but just don't overdo it, because it will add a lot of, overall add some salts to the ground, which you don't want too much of. Okay, Echiums. Do I grow Echiums? I've grown Echiums before. I've got them through winter, but I've never got them to flower in my garden because of winds have got them in spring and sort of hit them over and never allow them to actually get up to their full potential. I've got none in the ground at the moment. I have got a packet of seeds which I have somewhere in the greenhouse. I need to find them because I was looking for them the other day, and I will sow them as soon as I find them because sort of May, June's a great time to sow them. I'm not going to sow them in pots really. I might sow a couple in pots if I've got lots of seeds. Most of the seeds I'm just going to broadcast in the garden, and wherever they fall, some of them will be happy, some won't be happy, but the happy ones will hopefully germinate well and grow strongly and get nice big plants ready to go through their first winter. And then if they have a good season next year, they should flower in their second season or perhaps in their third season. So none at the moment, but I will hopefully have some plants later on this year. Okay, so John Warburton asks about houseplants, sturge and things like that. Is it okay to bring them out? Some it will be okay, some are hardier than others. I mean, if you think about, you can see fanciers in the houseplant section, which is to me is not houseplant at all. It's a totally hardy plant that will grow all year round outside. But generally, most houseplants or plants you find in the houseplant section are tender, and they want warm night time, so well above frost freeze. I always say like above 10 degrees at night really, but they also want warm days. They don't want to be hovering about 10, 12, 15 degrees day and night, because they'll just sit there miserable until the weather warms up. And if I know it's hard to think it's nice weather now, but if you cast your mind back to other springs, if you got those springs where it's just rainy and dark all day, plants will just rot away if it doesn't get warm enough for them to outgrow that sort of dreary weather if they're very tender plants. So this year looks a bit of an exception in the good way, because actually nighttime temperatures are no lower than 8 at the moment here, and sort of going up to about 10 or 12 degrees some nights in the next week or two, and daytime temperatures, like I said, up to about 22. So brilliant. If those temperatures come to pass, and they will happen, then yeah, a lot of the houseplants you can start bringing out now. But generally I treat most houseplants that I do bring out as filler plants, as just like the cherry on top of the cake at the end of the planting out season. So get everything out that like the cannas and bananas that are not completely tender, put them in the ground, get them established for a few weeks. Then as we move into June and even into early July, that's when I can bring out all the very tender houseplants. Like I said, bring them out earlier, but they won't do much until temperatures warm up. If you grow caladiums, for instance, so caladiums you get as basically a bulb, you get them in spring, you would be growing them now and sort of getting them into growth now. They want really warm temperatures to do anything, so you can grow them say indoors now, get them into leaf, so get 2 or 3 nice big colourful leaves, big heart-shaped leaves. And I've found, especially with caladiums, which you can grow all year round as an indoor plant if you want, although it will go dormant in winter. If you bring that out now, even if it's 10 degrees at night and 15, 18 degrees in the daytime, it just sits there. It needs warmer than that. It wants to be in the 20s, in the 30s ideally, to be growing really well, but definitely into the 20s to actually be producing leaves and growing quicker than the old leaves are dying off. So I would say hold off until we get nighttime temperatures 10 to 15 degrees and daytimes more than 20 degrees most of the week. So it might be a bit early for those, but it depends what houseplant you're talking about. Any more questions this evening? Let's have a look. Okay, so Neil Deer asked about Amicia zygomaris, which is like a Mexican shrub, herbaceous shrub. So it dies back in winter and grows every spring. I've had a look at mine and it is growing away nicely now. I've got nice green leaves, not very high yet, but there's loads and loads of shoots on my clump of zygomaris. There's about, it's about an area about 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters with dozens and dozens of shoots. So they are growing now, but in some years you don't see any growth till a bit later in May. but I've got nice growth. It's about 10-15 centimeters tall across as well, so that will shoot up very, very soon. So by the end of May it'll be, you know, sort of waist height, and then as we get to through June, by the end of June it'll be tall as me, about 2 meters tall. So you're asking the question about, you've not seen any growth yet, will cold winds kill it off? Cold winds do kill foliage of these plants, especially in sort of in winter and spring. If you had it into growth a bit early, it will kill off the growth, but as long as the plant's not dried out and the roots haven't been completely frozen for ages, like if it was in a pot in completely frozen, provided it wasn't in that sort of conditions, then it should be fine. If it's in the ground, it'll definitely be fine, because we've had a very mild winter all across the UK, so definitely no temperatures to worry the Zygomeris. So you should see growth by now though. I've got a couple I did from cuttings that I've still got, and they're sort of not doing much, but they're alive. But the one in the ground is really starting to motor now, so it should be fine. They can take a year or so to establish in the ground before they're really happy, but once they're in and growing well, you'll have it come back year after year. So, like I said, this is the start of my planting out part of the season, really. So for the last few months, you know, we've been growing things from seed, we've been dividing plants and taking cuttings of plants we've overwintered. I've got a greenhouse just over to my right that's full of seedlings. If you watched my video last week and my germination disaster video, because loads and loads of seedlings either didn't come up or they came up and they were yellow and growing really, really weak, and I'm pretty certain that is down to the compost I've used. It was just too sort of heavy, and it either got really wet or really dry and no nutrients, and the seedlings just didn't like it. The bigger actual seedlings like the ricinus and the zinnias, they did okay, they've germinated well, but they quickly sort of lost the vigour, whereas the things that had really tiny dust-like seeds, they hardly germinated or not germinated at all. They really hated that compost. So I've spent the last couple of days getting those seedlings that have survived and put them into nice new compost, and hopefully it'll come through, because some things will be fine. I know the ricinus will be fine, I'm sure, but zinnias don't really like sort of being manhandled and transferred from pot to pot, so they might, you know, turn the noses up and not do well. So we might have a great season of annual exotics this year because of the compost. I'll buy something nicer next year, and I'll try some different mixes out as well. But the next big job is actually planting out my onset bananas and planting out the cannas and things like that I overwintered. So, and my aeoniums as well. So I've got loads of aeoniums in pots, but I plant out a lot as well. So I've got about 10-15 big bananas to plant out. I've got a Musa sycamensis to plant out as well. And then there've been literally dozens and dozens of things like iracine, plectranthus and things like that to plant out over the next few weeks. There's loads to do. Just before I do that, I've actually got to tidy up the garden. I've still got loads of winter cuttings to take down, some bamboo and grasses from last year. So I'm going to clear everything, give the garden a good sort of dig over as well, a little fork over the ground, take out all the weeds, get that bloodfish and bone around my established plants, and then get the actual tender plants in the ground. And I'm doing it a little bit early this year. I think I'll probably do it next weekend, which is a couple of weeks earlier than normal. I normally wait till the end of May, and I've waited until the middle of June as well, when I had holiday in early June, and everything catches up. But by getting it out a little bit earlier, because the weather's looking so good and favourable, we should have a bigger, longer season, and plants should get established quicker, providing we still carry with warm weather into the end of May and into June. So that's the plan over the next few weeks. I hope you're also getting ready to plant out your plants as well. It's an exciting time of year where we can do this. I'll answer a couple more questions and we might call it a night. Just a little half an hour show tonight rather than a full hour in the garden. Jolie's has planted out on set today. I've heard they grow much better. Where's that? much better being watered with warm water. Is this true? Yes. So watering with warm water promotes growth early in the season. So if you really wanted to get the ultimate growth out of plants that are quite slow growing, especially like palm trees, watering with warm water from April onwards really helps the growth of those plants. And watering anything with warm water as we go through spring into summer, again, it warms up the ground. The ground is a key thing to get plants growing. It's not really the air temperatures directly that will make really strong growth quickly. It's actually the ground temperatures. You get really warm ground, which takes longer, because obviously you can have you get cold winter and then you get a few hot days, the ground is still really cold. That's why you've got to wait a while, because you've got to get the nice sunny days to warm up the ground for a few weeks before we get really fast growth. So you might notice some things like Musa Baju, if you had them planted out over winter, you think we've had some nice weather now for several weeks, from sort of mid-April onwards we've had decent weather. You might not have many leaves yet, you might have 1 or 2 leaves, but not that many. You might think back to last autumn and it's probably chucking out a leaf every week to 2 weeks, in autumn, and that is because the ground was a lot warmer as well as the air temperature. So watering with warm water does promote growth earlier and stronger because you're warming up the ground, and that's where the plant sort of determines whether it's going to grow quickly, because it's the ground temperature that's really important. But obviously watering with warm water can be a bit of a faff, because you've got to use you get hot water, you're going to mix it with cold water maybe, and then put it into a watering can and do it that way. You can't really use a hose pipe on a warm tap in many places, or it's a bit more hard to do so. But if you go down the route of using warm water from maybe water butts that have kept in the sun, or using warm water indoor tap, using a hose pipe or the watering can, you can choose a few plants you want to get quicker growth and do it that way. So that's one thing you can do to get early growth. It's a good tip there. Thanks for mentioning that, Joe. I think we'll have one more question before we call it a night. Let's have a look. So Richard Cadle has bought the Brugmansias from Lidl. Yeah, so if you have not seen on social media the last few days, Lidl have got their Brugmansias and other exotic plants in. They grow them, they get them in every spring, every year, and they always go really quick. So if you want a bargain, head down to Lidl tonight, well not tonight, tomorrow when it opens, and get yourself a Brugmansia or another exotic plant, because they sell them, don't know how much they are this year, but they've sold them for like $1.99, $2.99, $3.99 for decent sized plants that always grow really well if you get them early enough, because you want them to be watered, and if you leave them in the supermarket too long, they're not always watered well, and they do sell out quickly. So if you want a bargain Brugmansia, pick one up this week. They do them in a few colours. It can be pick and mix, whether you get the orange, the whites, the yellows. But yeah, Brugmansias love feed more than pretty much anything. You can feed them absolute loads all the time. Feed them as much as you want. They will just eat it all up and grow up nice and big. The pests love Brugmansias as well. Everything will go from green flies and with spider mite and caspid bugs and everything, and caterpillars as well seem to eat them as well. But if you're lucky and you get most of the pests off, they'll grow up nice and big. But you don't need loads of big leaves, because really you're growing for the flowers. So go for balanced fertilizer as well. Don't just go for nitrogen just for the leaves, but they will soak up any feed you give them. Right, I think we'll call it a night. So thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening Live. I've been Yorkshire Kris. I'll be back next week with probably another live episode, or we might do a proper featured episode as well. So thanks for watching. See you next week.